How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to TheBlueShifting and welcome back to Chaos Head. So, yeah, we finally are getting answers, and Fez has got a lot of points now in her favor because she rolled with the punches, actually answered our questions in some way, and helped us escape the cops. It's just like, really interesting to see how that played out. Genuinely seeing that, okay, so the D-Swords, they do fundamentally break reality. They reminded me of Shard Blades from the Stormlight Archive, which is always exciting. The C parallels. It's also one of those things where, like, I'm like 99% sure that Brandon Sanderson has never played a visual novel, let alone Chaos Head. But the parallel idea there is actually kind of funny that they are so similar in concept, at least. So I'm excited to learn more about the swords. But in general, just knowing that, like, delusions manifesting into reality, that's explaining a lot. Especially with the second Fez, and like how Fez didn't respond to that. Like, we're not in any real meaningful way, so what's that about? She must not have been too surprised by it, but dang, that's crazy. And then, yeah, just also like the confirmation that we're kind of most likely being followed, but the thing is, like, was it the police? Or was it that, like, organization, Nozomu or whatever? Oh, man, it's interesting. I'm very excited about it. So, yeah, I think what we're probably going to see, because, like, I wasn't too sure. I kind of was guessing, and after I thought about it, I was like, you know, I bet we were, like, a small scene away from the end of the chapter, because this feels like the end of the D-Sword chapter, which was chapter 4. So, I imagine we're going to see Ban here doing his thing, and then we're going to essentially see the end of the chapter pop. What are you doing? I don't know if you can hear that. My cat's freaking out. You okay? Whatever. He's probably fine. I think he's just upset that, like, I'm not paying attention to him because, you know, I'm recording. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being patient with me. I think we should just jump right in. I imagine we're pretty much at the end of the chapter, but that's fine. That's not a terrible place for us to have ended it, so let's see how it goes. Let's jump in. As he walked cautiously through the narrow trash-ridden streets of, here we go, Maruya Machiro, Man Yusuji jammed his hand inside his pants pocket. Inside, he found a few dozen small coins.
Senpai, 貼り付けの現場に何があるっていうんすか?
So he's going back to that crime scene.
もう事件から2週間以上経ってるし、散々調べられた後っすよ。新しい証拠なんて出てきませんって。
His partner, Detective Suwa, had been walking behind him, grousing in an irritated voice for quite some time. That was understandable, of course, as the job originally assigned to them had been to tail an important witness from the NewGen case, Nishijo Takumi. However, the two of them had abandoned their tailing mission and had instead come to the scene of the third NewGen incident, colloquially known as the crucifixion. Ban had decided to abandon their original task of tailing Nishijo Takumi, forcing the burden onto some other detectives in the same jurisdiction. The rookie detective, Suwa, was not pleased by this.
やっぱまずいっすよ。尾行に戻りましょう。
The rookie detective had consistently been pushed around by his senior without any explanation. He could not withstand it. For that reason, he had been insistently trying to persuade Ban for a long while now, but to this Ban only said,
いいから黙ってついてこいって。
He remained aloof and refused to heed his junior's perfectly sound arguments. Finally, they at last came across a narrow road blocked off by yellow barricade tape. As Suwa let out the latest in his myriad of sighs, his cell phone began vibrating near his chest. He quickly took out his phone, which had been set to vibrate, assumed the look of a capable detective, and pressed the accept button.
すわっす。はい。はい。
Oh, they're getting the call about how he lost them, how the tailors lost him. As he listened to Sua's voice coming from behind him, Ban came to a stop in front of the barricade tape. Behind that tape was the crime scene. A deep darkness had settled over the area just as it had when the crime had been committed. But now there was no remaining trace of the incident, save for the barricade tape.
見失った?女か。やられたっすね。とりあえず、深センの家に戻ってほしいっす。はい。張り込んでてください。いやいや、大丈夫っすよ。責任はバン警部補が取るっすから。
Cool. Throw your senior under the bus like that. Ban smiled wryly upon hearing that. Suwa could be surprisingly shrewd. Of course, Ban had no intention of placing the blame onto his subordinates, nor onto the detective he'd placed in charge.
なるべく早くこっちも合流します。本当申し訳ないです。お願いします。
Right as Suwa hung up the phone, he returned to his begrudging gaze to Ban. Ban ducked under the tape. Suwa had no choice but to reluctantly accompany him.
見失ったって？
尾行に気づかれたっす。直前にネットカフェで一騒動あったみたいっすし。
女ってのは？
岸本綾瀬っす。
They know her.
騒がせバンドの嬢ちゃんか。つながりは？
同じ学校の同じ学年っすね。他は今のところ特に。クラスメートでもないっす。
Yeah, interesting. Ban brought his hand to his chin, savoring the rough texture of the stubble for a moment. Yep, I get that. I actually can feel that right now. I don't know. I used to have a beard, and it was okay, but I've just kind of fallen in love again with a clean shave. Well, at least mostly clean. I could deal with the stubble side. After which, he took out several coins from his pocket and started counting them in the dark one by one. Suwa stared at his eccentric senior with a puzzled look on his face.
何してるんすか？
よりによって5円玉だけありゃしね。
Why would you need a 5 yen coin?
そうだ、お前5円玉持ってねえか？
はあ。
It's like, whatever. Perplexed, Suwa took a 5 yen coin out from his wallet and held it out to Ban. If you can hear my cat, I do not know what's going on with him. Like, he's just got the zoomies, I think. I can't stop him. It is what it is. However, instead of taking it straight away, Ban tore to the bottom of the button of his shirt he was wearing. He then untied the thread and fastened it to the button.
先輩、ついに頭おかしくなったんすか？
Is he gonna test for like a magnetic pole of some kind?
生意気な口聞くようになったじゃねえか。
Ban chuckled and lightly rapped Suwa on the head. He then took out a thread and weaved it through the hole in the center of the coin.
よし、お前にやらせてやるよ。
After pinching both ends of the thread with his finger, Ben let a 5 yen coin hang down and handed it to his junior.
振り子っすか？
Yeah, okay. Why would he do this? That's really strange. A pendulum.
Ah.
Ben smiled mischievously.
こいつが事件の重要なヒントを与えてくれるかもしれねえぜ。
Alright, we're going more and more into this like weird metaphysical stuff. Like, isn't this like an urban legend type thing?
マジっすか？
Yeah, I know, right?
バンさん、勘弁してほしいっすよ。そのために仕事をほっぽってここまで来たんすか？
Sua's tone was almost mournful. I kind of agree though with Suwa. Like, I'd be like that too. I'd be like, oh, are you serious? He'd been pushed around countless times by Ban before now, but this time Ban had finally managed to utterly stomp the rookie detective. Stump, not stomp.
サイキック操作とかダウジングとか
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking it would be dowsing too. Technique for locating groundwater, mineral deposits, or various other things by relying on the movement of a rod, pendulum, or other similar technology. It's also been known for treasure hunting. One of the most popular methods is to use 2 angled rods, typically in the form of an L-shaped wires. The person who does the dowsing is called a dowser. It is widely believed the human body has an internal magnet that reacts to underground water veins and other objects, and that has caused muscles to move unconsciously. The prevailing theory is that this is why dowsing rods appears that they move by themselves.
その手のテレビでも見て影響を受けたんすね、先輩。
そういうお前も詳しいじゃねえの。
いや、まあ自分も見たは見たっすよ。先週のユーリ・ブライトマン。
Okay, Yuri Brightman. That sounds familiar. Like, it sounds like it's a reference to a like more the expanded like side adventure universe.
ユーリ・ブライトマンっすよ。今話題になってるアメリカの超能力捜査官っす。
Yuri Brightman. Typically found in America, an investigator uses psychic abilities such as clairvoyance in order to aid in solving crimes. Often appears in Japanese media. However, despite the established title, such a person does not actually exist in America, and the mainstream perception of a psychic investigator is that it is extremely ineffective. Okay, is this a real thing I've never heard of before?
俺が見たのはそんなチャラチャラしたもんじゃねえや。
The only psychic detective thing I remember was the show Psyched, which wasn't a psychic detective. He was just like a Sherlock Holmes type of person, but he had no experience in criminal investigations or like had no expertise. But he wanted to help solve crimes, and so he sells himself as a psychic. When in reality, he's just really, really good at like noticing small details and putting together a picture and making very educated guesses. But he sells it as if he's psychic. It's actually a really fun show. Man, I haven't watched it in a while.
どこかのお偉い大学教授が出ててだな。
でもテレビっすよね。
いちいち文句の多いやつだ。
He's a detective, of course he does.
やってみりゃわかる。ほら、いいから吊るしてみろって。
When his senior issued that request, Suwa did not have any room to refuse. His lips pursed in a sullen manner, but he reluctantly accepted the 5-yen coin. He pinched the ends of the string and began to twirl it around in a circle, creating a centrifugal motion. It was too dark for either of them to see it clearly, so Ban flicked on a 100-yen cigarette lighter and used it as their light source.
先輩ってタバコ吸いましたっけ？
10年以上前に禁煙したやん。なんでだ？
ライター持ってたっすから。
こういうこともあろうかと用意しといたんだよ。
Okay.
はは。
Right.
で、これで何がわかるんす？
もっといろいろ動かしたり止めたりしてみろ。
Ban monitored the movements of the 5-yen coin intently. Ban's eyes were so intensely serious, Suwa could no longer complain about him being this being a pointless excursion.
やっぱりな。
What, nothing?
わかるか？
何がっす
五円玉の動きだよ。さっきから少しだけ楕円を描いているような気がしねえか？
Okay, yeah, I was wondering about that. So, like, it could be trying to talk about, like, a strong magnetic pole of some kind if the coin is made out of a material that is magnetic by nature. Using the thread as a support, the dangling 5-yen coin was slowly revolving around in a circular motion. Suwa cocked his head.
力の入れ方とかじゃないんすかね。
Well, the thing is, like, as long as you're not continuing to swing it outward, like, if you just swung it and then held it, it should be a relatively circular motion. So if it is, like, ellipsing, that is some kind of interference.
お前、楕円に回るように意識してやってんのか？
いや、結構適当にくるくると。
もっと手を動かさねえようにやってみろ。
はあ。
Suwa consciously tried to move his hand in a circular fashion, but no matter how hard he tried, the trajectory drawn by the 5-yen coin was always elliptical in shape.
おかしいな。
意識的に違う形にしようとしてもできねえだろ？
Ban's face was full of pride. Suwa, on the other hand, was still not convinced. He continued relentlessly in his quest to change the motion of the pendulum.
まあ、渋谷のどこでもこの現象が見られるわけじゃねえが。それでも十数箇所はここみてえな場所があるらしいぜ。
確かに不思議っすね。でもだから何なんす？
Ban looked up in satisfaction, put his lighter back in his pocket, and then retrieved the hand fan that he'd stabbed between his belt and his pants.
お前、渋谷がなんでここまで若者を引きつけるか知ってるか？
五円玉が楕円を描くからっすか？
Suwa thought he was making a clever jab, but Ban nodded readily in response, calmly fanning his face all the while.
まあ、そういうことだ。
So something attracts people, specifically young people. Oh, hello again.
なぜこの渋谷という場所は若者たちをこんなにも引きつけると思う？
Oh, interesting. It's because the barrier between, like, this realm and other realms is thinner. And so people, especially younger people who have, like, lots of dreams and delusions, can manifest things more easily. Suddenly, the conversation I was having with Fez transitioned into something completely unrelated, but I was actually somewhat relieved by that. I'd expected Fez to start treating me like a pervert, but she just ignored it like nothing had ever happened.
日本いいえ世界を見渡してみてもこんな場所他になかなかないわ
Did this have something to do with the D swords? If not, then I didn't care. I had to somehow find a way to get Fez to tell me how to get my hands on a real D sword. Dude, I think she's trying to. Listen.
新宿でも池袋でもなくて渋谷この街の名前が一人歩きをしてしまうくらい
That's true. Both in front of and behind me, the same words were being spoken from the two Fezes at the exact same time. Perfect synchronization. Gave me a somewhat strange feeling. Had Fez split in half? Were both of them the real Fez, or were both of them imposters?
日本中の人たちに刻まれているわ若者のバージという記号がなぜかしら
Why? Well, that has absolutely nothing to do with me.
ファッションの街だからお店がたくさんあるから流行の発信者だから
Maybe.
よくテレビに映るから
Maybe. I mean, they all sound reasonable.
交通の便がいいから
That's also fairly reasonable.
違うわどれ
The two Fezes paused for a moment. Being watched from both the front and behind started to make me feel uncomfortable.
大いなる意志よ
The greater will.
工事存在もっとわかりやすく言えば神による意志な
The will of God. Or a god. This is bad, my rational side warned me. This could be... Maybe she was trying to recruit me into some sketchy religious cult? I began to feel uneasy. Man, maybe I should just get the heck out of here. But upon hearing the next thing Fez said to me, I realized I no longer had that option.
理想度もまたその意志による導きよ
Okay.
引力ってあるだろ
There's gravity. You heard of gravity? Ban returned to the main street from the alleyway and then began walking towards Shibuya Station. Suwa, who now assumed they were going to Shinsen, ceased after his senior detective with an obvious frown on his face. No, chased after his senior.
万有引力のことっすか
Yeah, so he's talking about like the general one. Law discovered by Isaac Newton, stating that all matter, energy, and anything that has mass is a force that attracts it to other things with mass. The force of attraction becomes stronger the heavier the two sections of matter are, and it becomes weaker the greater the distance between them. The law also applies to gravitational forces exhibited by the Earth and other planets. There's a famous story that claims Isaac Newton discovered universal gravitation when he saw an apple fall from a tree, but that's no more than a myth.
よく知ってるじゃねえの。さすがいい大学出てるだけあるな。
Suwa grew discouraged in response to Ban's slightly mocking tone.
あいにく大学じゃオカルトは勉強しなかったっすけどね。
オカルトじゃねえよ。世界には引力がアンバランス化してる地域ってのが何か所かある。
I feel like I would have heard about this if it were really true. Like, I've heard suspicions that gravity is inconsistent, but the trouble is that any inconsistency that you would be able to potentially detect is just drowned out by the general just mass of gravity that is the Earth. In order for you to have an actual, like, unbalanced level of gravity that would cause a coin to start to pull like that, like consistently in an alternate direction, you'd have to have a massive well of gravity that has a small like reach, because remember gravity like is weakened by distance, but so it'd mean that you'd have to have something local that was incredibly powerful. I'm talking more powerful than Everest, because I think if you're standing relatively close to like the largest mountain in the world and you spun the coin, it would not be affected like that. So we're talking essentially the level that would be required of something like to use another side venture example, micro black hole, miniature black hole. Perhaps that's what they're trying to describe. But the stability of such a thing would be dubious at best. I'll assume, though, that they could be referring to something like this because it is canonical inside this universe. But I'm just saying that from a physics perspective, it's very dubious at best. And as we've learned more about things like Hawking radiation and the nature of black holes in general, it's become fairly clear that like micro black holes, if they existed, would not behave like this. If they're very small, they likely wouldn't be strong enough to actually pull in all light. So they would actually give off an enormous amount of heat and energy, and they would essentially explode shortly after they were created. Their singularity would just be too unstable. And so they would actually give off light in a sense, because some light would fall into a singularity and not be able to escape, but a lot of light would still be able to. And so it would be very bright, very noisy, and explode probably like a bomb. So, no, wouldn't be one. But let's assume that we're just going to be dealing with micro black holes. That could explain it.
アンバランスかですか。
振り子が楕円を描いたのもその影響ってこった。GE レートって呼ぶらしい。
The GE rate.
GE レート。
ああ、正式名称は何だっつってたかな。グルバケーション、グラリッシュ、
No.
引力ならグラビテーションじゃないですか。グラビテーションエラーレート。
おー、そうそう、それだ。グラビテーションエラーレート。
If that is a thing, which I've never heard that term before, but if that is a thing, the gravitation error rate would be so minor it'd be almost impossible to detect, especially by hand.
直訳すると万有引力の異常値ですか。
物理学の辞典を調べりゃ載ってるはずだぜ。
I don't know about that.
載ってたっすかね。
Alright. I want to check that out real quick, because like they're making a claim of, oh, you could just look it up. Well, I'm gonna try that. Okay, so beyond the first 4 links that are just links to Chaos Head, gravitation error rate seems to be a generalized term to say that there are minor inconsistencies within the rate of gravitation across different areas of the planet. They're minor, practically unnoticeable, but they need to be accounted for, and that accountability comes from various factors. What's a good example of one? All right, tides. Where do the tides come from? Well, they come from gravity. Gravity of the moon and the sun. Gravity of the moon and the sun are constantly pulling, and because it's a liquid base, it kind of makes a bulge that forms, 2 bulges that form and kind of seem to operate around the Earth. So that's why the tide comes up and down. That's a very minor change that is an effect of gravitational rate differentials. That's probably the best example of that. But again, it's not an error rate. It's an accounting. The fact that we are under forces of gravity that are basically drowned out by the Earth's gravity from our position on the surface, but, you know, that gravity still exists and still out there, so, like, there's probably little fluctuations that come from Jupiter, Mercury, Venus and Mars. These celestial bodies that are, like, out there, they still kind of affect and exert a gravitational force on us. It's just so minor, we really can't barely detect it, but if you had a really sensitive material, you might be able to, especially, like I said, the sun and the moon. Those are the sources of gravitational anomalies that would most likely actually be affected. Not a localized thing. But anyway, that's the physicist in me being upset. Not upset, but like, kind of like, dubious. Anyway, the GE rate, an imbalance that contradicts the laws of universal gravitation. It doesn't. Everything we've been able to find has had a very logical explanation when examined properly. It's not contradicting the law of universal gravitation. It's just that it's the problem of perspective. is that if you're limiting the factors of where where anomalies can come from, then yeah, it can seem like it breaks the laws of physics. But the thing is that it's pretty clear that it doesn't. There are things like gravitational waves too. Like there could be a temporary anomaly that could come from something like black holes colliding somewhere in the universe. It sends out rippling waves of gravitation. Those rippling waves might throw off sensors a little bit. But nah, it's not a contradiction. Discovered by Isaac Newton, the law of the universal gravitation is a fundamental force of nature that acts between all forms of energy and matter, i.e., anything that contains mass. It's commonly believed that the great number of strata layered upon the Earth's surface played a large part in this law. A typical example of something that disrupts local areas would be lava beds. This phenomenon can be found at the foot of Mount Fuji, Aokigahara, also known as the Sea of Trees, where there have been several recorded instances of compasses becoming unusable. I thought that was usually because of a large concentration of iron, because iron can become magnetized, and thus a sensitive device like a compass, especially a nice one, can be temporarily thrown off because it's detecting a source of mass that is also magnetized. Studies have also shown that fossil beds, particularly rich in iron and calcium, are another type of stratum in which magnetism is repelled. Also, wait, hang on, another thing. So they're saying that the Sea of Trees, there have been several recording instances of compasses becoming unusable. Compasses don't operate off gravity, they operate off magnetism. Why are they bringing this up? Adding to the previous factors, magnetite is also believed to have been particularly strong influence on gravity. Okay. A type of mineral that is used as material in magnets is black in color, has a metallic luster, and the crystals have an octahedral shape. If magnetite, a naturally occurring magnet with an octahedral crystal structure, were to be found beneath the Earth in a quantity large enough to warrant being recognized as a dike, it would be as if the ground itself were magnet. Then that would result in the extremely high chance of an area producing a minute gravitational deviations. The GE rate of the measurement of gravitational values of the region in which such values have been distorted by the previously mentioned geological strata. When Ban's explanation concluded, the two men who had been walking the entire time were just exiting onto Doga and Zaka. The scenery surrounding them instantly turned bright and dazzling.
渋谷の平均 GE レートは世界でもトップクラスらしいぜ。地面に置いたボールが一人でに坂を登っていくようなケースもあるらしい。
マジっすか?
I'd love to see that. Suwa, who'd been listening in utter silence up until now, showed his surprise at a slightly exaggerated tone.
まるで SF 映画の世界っすね。
お前の好きなな。
自分は小難しいのは嫌いっすよ。壮大なスケールの映画がいいっす。
Yeah.
知らねえよ。
先輩の説明はすごくもっともらしいっすけど、なかなか信じられないっすよ。
Yeah, I'm with you there. Like I said, I'm pretty sure this is some like far-fetched ideas that a writer's grabbed and is just running with. Ironically, it's a lot less believable so far than the Steins-Gate models of using microscopic black holes that are created temporarily in order to send data in a compressed format through time, because conceptually, if you could pass into a singularity and then back out of it without distorting or destroying the data, it could travel through time, because genuine physics models, the part of the reason why black holes are so bizarre is that the models that we use to predict movements through time and space break down, because if you cross a singularity, it inverts that model and allows for the possibility of traveling forward and backward through time once you've entered the singularity, because the gravitation coefficient literally becomes a negative number. It's really bizarre, because that's not a imaginary number used to because imaginary numbers are essentially used to fill in gaps that the number system just has. The number system is essentially a language, and that language is not perfect. It's one of the closest to perfect we have, because it simply operates off of physical laws, but we just sometimes can't describe certain configurations of nature in ways that make sense with the rest of the system. And we have imaginary numbers that help us to finish equations, and that those equations remain accurate helps us solidify that despite the fact that we use things that don't quite exist, like the square root of a negative number, in the proper instances, it's still consistent enough with the math and follows the proper logic enough that it is valid to some degree, and is likely just a representation about an aspect of the nature of the universe and numbers in general that we just don't have a much clearer definition of yet. Hopefully someday we'll get one. You could say like the square root of a -1, for example. Like usually it's the enumeration of an I in at least the math I studied. That I probably represents an actual formula that would make a lot of sense. It wouldn't involve breaking rules, because the square root of a -1 is about as impossible as dividing by 0. Like, it just mathematically doesn't make sense. But unlike dividing by 0, using the square root of -1 can be used to help answer questions and legitimately find answers that then are used in predictive models that help us do things like get to the moon. So clearly there is something real there. We just don't have the language or understanding to properly describe it. We can simply just observe it and utilize what we know and kind of have this kind of integer, basically, a stand-in for something far more complex that we probably just don't have the comprehension levels for quite yet, but we can still utilize, even though we don't understand the entirety of how it works. We understand its nature well enough and know that its place in nature works, and thus we can use predictive models to actually make the math work. I would argue that that's simply what's happening here in a lot of cases, but some big leaps they're using for this narrative.
GE レートなんて聞いたこともないっすし。
てめえの無知を一般論として語るな。デカに必要なのは事実を客観視することだぞ。
はあ。でも。
What Shuo said was equally true. The research into the GE rate was minimal, and it certainly was not something that would be taught to an everyday college student. Man himself had not been aware of it until a few weeks ago.
そもそもまだ肝心の答えを聞いてないっすよ。渋谷の重力がアンバランスだとなんで若者が引きつけられるんすか？
引力と人間ってのは意外と因果関係があるってことだよ。お前、生き物のバイオリズムは月の引力に関係してるっての知ってたか？
Okay, again, that's a kind of pseudoscience thing. There's arguments to be said that like people who work in medicine, like at hospitals or paramedics or police, do seem to agree that when the full moon comes out, lots of stuff goes more wild. I still subscribe to the fact that the reason why more crazy stuff happens at a full moon is because it's bright enough outside that people can get away and feel safer doing things outside at night than they normally would. That pushes people to do things like drinking more, staying out later, being more aggressive. You know, that fear of the dark gets negated by the bright shining globe in the sky that helps us feel more secure and thus feel more able to do things. But you also have the time of day where a lot of people aren't doing much. It's free time, not many people having to work, and a lot of people might be drinking. That leads to more accidents.
潮の満ち引きだけじゃねえんだぜ。
ウミガメの産卵には月の影響があるらしいってのはどっかで耳にしたことがあるっす。
Sure.
ああ、必ず満月の夜に産卵するってやつだな。だがウミガメだけじゃねえ。他に有名なのだとサンゴが産卵するのも満月の夜だ。
Well, I would argue that that most likely has something to do with, increased levels of light.
海の中が雪降ってるみたいになるやつっすね。
満月の夜は引力も強くなってるって科学的に実証されてんだ。当然人間にもその影響は及んでる。
What? Has that been proven though? Because it's been scientifically proven that gravity is much stronger on full moon nights. That doesn't make any sense. Because the moon, whether it's being lit up by the sun or not, the gravity it exerts on the planet is the same. It's not bigger because it's reflecting more light. That makes no sense. Like, there's no logical connection to that.
人の出産にもってことっすか？
出産だけじゃねえよ。バイオリズムって言ったろ。普通の生理現象はもちろん、交通事故や事件、病気、食欲とか性欲とかにも密接なつながりがある。興奮すると頭に血が上ってるって言うだろう。 あれは月の引力に引っ張られてるんだよ。
No, that makes no sense. Like, the moon is always the same distance from Earth in the scale. Like, it changes the distance in a fractional wobble type way, but that wobble has nothing to do with the phase of the moon as you see it on the planet. It has everything to do with the elliptical orbit that it's in. But it's such a small wobble, it's not something you'd ever notice, and it's not consistently like, oh, it's whenever the moon's full.
そりゃ極論だと思うっすよ。
A bit of a stretch.
まるで個々の感情なんて関係なくて全部月のせいだって言ってるようなもんじゃないっすか。
そこまでは言わねえがな。集団心理って言うだろう。この町に来た途端に楽しい気分になったり、ちょっと無茶したくなったりするかもしんねえんじゃねえの？
Maybe. Crowd psychology makes a little more sense, but that's just because people behave differently in a group rather than individually.
ニュージェネの一連の事件に対する反応だってそうだ。この町でそのニュースを見た連中は大抵反応が同じだ。どいつもこいつも楽しんでやがる。自分だけは被害者にならないって気持ちだ。対岸の火事を眺めていい気になってる。
Now that is a defining factor of humanity. You enjoying the things that are happening in the world, maybe not purely enjoying, but you're still a spectator to it. The tragedies, the wars, the conflicts, because if it's not directly involving you and people you know, it just becomes a spectacle. Something that you can have feelings about, but you're safe. It'll never happen to you or people you love. So it's somebody else's problem. So you can only care so much. And it's unfortunately that drives a lot of politics, a lot of policy. People who will get hyped up about a thing being bad or good or being right or wrong, and often have literally no experience with it or have any contact with somebody who's experiencing those types of issues. And thus, they are literally trying to pass laws that are telling people how to behave, what they think and feel, or what they should do in very sensitive and personal ways. But because people assume they know how it feels and what it's like as a passive observer, they decide that they know what's best, or what should be someone else's problem, what shouldn't be. That's the thing that's troubling, is like, for me, it's never been about like a left or right issue. For me, I think it's about understanding that I don't have the knowledge to understand every single circumstance, and thus putting limit on people's choices feels like a bad thing. I feel like it's more important to be open, and as long as those choices aren't going to bring direct harm, and in fact, if those choices involve anything that involves medical or mental health, then it should be something that's left up to them to decide with consultation from professionals, and then, that's their choice. But that's the idea here, is that this perspective, that you enjoy the spectacle, reveling in a feeling that it will never happen to you, and it'll just be somebody else's problem, but that for some reason you should have a say in why it happens or how it happens.
そういう集団心理も GE レートのせいってことですか？
可能性としてはありだろう。渋谷に来たら楽しい気分になるってのが若いやつらの頭の中に無意識に刷り込まれれば。
若者がこの街に惹かれる理由になるってわけですね。
Suo really is a fast learner, Ben thought to himself, impressed. The junior detective was still young, but that part of him truly was worthy of praise. In addition, what set him apart from other young people was that he did not just follow his seniors blindly. Whenever he had a question or whenever he thought something did not make sense, he would always voice it despite the fact that he was a junior in name. That's a good man right there. That's me too. Even if I don't know, or I come across as an idiot, I'd rather come across as an idiot and ask, even if it seems pretty obvious, because I'd rather have that security and not just be going off on my own, assuming I know what's best.
GE レートについては一応分かったっすけど、それでどうやって犯人を探すんすか？もし GE レートに影響されて今回みたいな事件が起きたってなら、何百年も前から似たようなことが起きてないと変なんじゃん。
Yeah.
そいつはこれから調べりゃいいさ。専門家がな。
A specialist.
先輩は調べないんすか？
俺はデカだぞ。
Ben smirked from ear to ear.
調べるのはニュージェネのことだけだ。そのために今日はわざわざ仕事サボって現場の GE レートを測ったんだ。
I guess he's literally saying now he skipped out on work.
もしこれまでの一連の現場の G レートが異常を示したなら何を意味すると思う？
Following your logic, it would mean that there's something exerting some kind of will or kind of influence on people.
まさか
Sua's eyes went wide and he stopped dead in his tracks. It seemed as if he'd realized what Ban was trying to imply. Oh, the other thing is too, though, it would mean if all the sites displayed the same phenomena, then you could detect this phenomena in other locations. You might actually be able to try and predict where the next NewGen case would happen. That could be very, very important. If you had the manpower to watch those sites, you might even be able to catch it in the act.
事件は G レートが異常を示している場所で起こるってことですか？だとしたら次の事件が起こる場所をある程度予測できるんですね。
まだそう決まったわけじゃねえよ。それをこれから調べんだ。
There was something lurking within the city. Something yet unknown, hidden deep beneath the flashy exterior. Perhaps it was akin to Pandora's box, something not meant to be touched by the hands of men. And we'll check the tip. A box given to mankind by the gods in Greek mythology. People were told never to open it, but a woman named Pandora gave into her curiosity and opened it anyway, unleashing the many calamities held inside upon the world. It said that the only thing left remaining in the box was hope. Thoughts such as these pervade Ban's mind as he watched the pedestrians file down the street of Shibuya. Okay. As soon as I heard those words, I knew I couldn't take it anymore. Fez had been going on and on about all these things I didn't care about, all while continuing to dodge what I'd actually asked her. I couldn't possibly care any less about some greater will or why Shibuya attracts young people or whatever. It's so dumb, dude. Like, pay attention! There was only one thing I wanted to know.
Disorder. どうすれば手に入る?
Mustering up my courage, I asked Fez that question.
教えてよ!
Without changing her aloof expression, Fez gazed down at the D-sword she was holding. Despite how gigantic the sword was, she seemed to be handling it with incredible ease. Maybe she just had an absurd level of physical strength or something. Why is it that he'll go on and on about all this random crap and he can't tell me the most crucial thing I need to know? You don't know? Then how the living fetch did you get a D-sword you're holding in your hand right now? The power. So in other words, those without power couldn't see them. But I could see it extremely clearly. But then, what did she mean by the power? Was she saying that I had a supernatural powers like what the two Fezes in front of me had? If Shogun and Yua were destroying my life because of it, then I didn't want this stupid bullcrap power. But I still did want a D-sword. Because it'd grant me salvation. Fez had said so. He's just willing to go with what people say. Stuff like the greater will and the reason why Shibuya attracted young people made no difference to me. I didn't want some random power, nor did I want to be roped into all this BS in any way, shape, or form, but in order to escape the clutches of Shogun and Yua, I had to get my hands on a sword. But Fez's answer was as ambiguous as every other darn thing she said. Biting my lip, I tried desperately to think of any way I could extract information from her. But as a person who was terrible at talking to 3D people, I couldn't think of anything that'd be effective at all. I tried to pull from the bank of eroge situations, but everything that came to mind was fairly unsettling, such as slipping her an aphrodisiac, tying her up, or imprisoning her. Super useful stuff! Man, I may or may not be extremely effed up. Yeah! You think? Oh boy. Fez turned her back to me, then slowly began to walk deeper into the tunnel. When she said that, I realized that we still hadn't introduced ourselves to each other yet.
Nishijo. Takumi.
I couldn't see Ayase's expression from where I was. Why was she laughing? Why she was laughing, I didn't know.
また会いましょう。匠。
Ayase was moving farther and further away. I fearfully turned my head to see what happened to the other Ayase, only to find out that she had disappeared without a trace. Had she literally disappeared, or had she just walked out of the underpass? Ayase had said that the other Ayase was a delusion. Maybe that was the power of the D-Sword? I mean, they're associated. I returned my gaze to the inside of the underpass, and right as I did, I saw that Ayase was going up the staircase, which was about 50 meters deeper into the tunnel. Eventually, her figure disappeared completely, and now all that remained was the eerie silence of the underpass. I wasn't brave enough to yell after her. I was too exhausted to run after her, and I was overwhelmed with the feeling that it wasn't worth the trouble. In the end, all I could do was return home as cautiously as I could, making sure not to be spotted by Yua or the police on the way. Sure, I bet you the police did see you, but good on ya. Felt like it'd been ages since I'd last been in my base, but in reality, it'd only been half a day. I'd left my computer on, leaving my Seratan screensaver to cast a pale light, together with her smile across the dark room. I locked the door tightly from the inside and threw myself into the sofa. When I closed my eyes, I couldn't help but remember everything that had happened today. I couldn't believe even the police thought I was the culprit. They had it all wrong. There was absolutely no way I could have killed all those people. Investigate like you actually gave a crap. This isn't a game. Otaku freaks like myself were ostracized by society, so they must have thought that they could just pin the crime on one of us and the public wouldn't even bat an eye. They couldn't actually catch the real culprit, so they wanted to save face by using me as a scapegoat. Dang it. What could I do to clear my name? The scene at the At Cafe flashed before my eyes, sending a chill down my spine. There existed someone that was even more terrifying than the police. Yua, my enemy. I had been so unbelievably relieved that I hadn't heard anything from her recently. I'd been growing more and more confident that she'd never contact me again. That was foolish. But today I'd realized that I'd been mistaken. In order to oppose all of them, I needed a D-Sword. I glanced at the cheap sword that was leaning against my PC desk. It was a fake. Ayase had said that only people with the power can see them. The day I'd bought my sword, none of me had seen it with me. And unlike Ayase, Senna's swords, it didn't glow. Where would a real one be? I had to get my hands on one as soon as possible. If I didn't, I was doomed. Getting wrapped up in something this insane sucked so much.
あなたは DID 多重人格なんです。
No, that's not true. That's impossible. That's like, is that intentionally a reference to Luke Skywalker? Multiple personalities disorder is supposed to be rare in Japan. You've been watching way too many gosh darn movies, Yua. Also, there's debate on whether it actually exists or like it manifests. Like the fact that people will manifest multiple personalities is real, but the validity of it is very much in question. I don't know because I've never met anyone who's actually claimed to have multiple personalities. Like, it's just, it's one of those sections of psychology that's considered dubious. There's several people who believe it doesn't exist and it's just a figment of imagination of somebody who's got a troubled psyche, where it's a explanation or event for usually trauma-based psychological fractures. But it's not like actually different personalities. It's the same personality, but manifesting in different forms as a method of mental compartmentalization and self-defense. Like, often in drama, it's used as literally as if you have multiple people stuffed inside your body, rather than it just being different aspects of the same person that are manifest as a way of protecting what one sees as their core or their innocence. So a good example of that would be if someone suffers a major repeated traumatic experience as a child, they may develop multiple personalities, and one of those personalities will likely be said child, because the idea is that at the time, the way that they dealt with the stress and the torment of what was happening to them is they disassociated. They disconnected themselves from that opportunity, and then in that way, that fractured part of their mind that was supposed to be their childhood ends up being kind of coalesced. It becomes this innocent part of them that doesn't have to touch the bad things that happen in the world or the consequences of those bad things, which is why that personality never seems to grow up. And then as they grow up, they have other personalities that fracture off as different traumatic things happen to them, and those people never developed a proper way of processing these traumas because they're, first of all, foundational, horrific, and second of all, they often are overlooked or discredited, and so they develop a self-soothing, which is fracturing their personality. It's not multiple personalities as in multiple, like Jekyll and Hyde type situations. It's the same person and personality self-fracturing. That I can believe in, because that's not actually different personalities. They're different aspects, and the idea is it's compartmentalization of trauma in order to try and make it easier to manage. That I can believe. Not like the true multiple personalities disorder. But again, I'm not a psychologist. That's just my interpretation of what I see, what I have seen, and what makes sense to me. I'd love to meet somebody who actually feels like they have multiple personality disorders or has been diagnosed with it. And I'd love to ask what they feel it is, what their interpretation of it is. I don't have multiple personalities. There's no proof of that at all. Buddy, if there's ever been a person who has proof of it, it's you, because I really, I think he needs to document for like a week. Where was he the past 24 hours of every day? Because if he can't document that, that's concerning. There you go.
違う。あれは違う。
But that chat log is consistent with what you had told me.
あんなの捏造だ。証拠にはならない。
But there's no proof that I don't have for multiple personalities.
先生は僕を多重人格だなんて診断しなかった。
But that very doctor, Dr. Takashina, is now gone for some unknown reason.
僕は僕だ。僕が一番よく知ってる。
That's the idea, though. Like, if multiple personalities is like I've described it, each of those personalities is you. That's the thing. Anything those other personalities are capable of is you. It's at its core you. Like, it's not like another person. It's just you. But I don't actually know myself. I felt chills on the nape of my neck. That usual presence, someone watching me, the unknown gaze. Whose eyes are those eyes?
そうだ。将軍だ。あいつが犯人だ。チャットログにもそう書いてあったじゃないか。
I don't think so.
ユアは将軍の手下だし、ニュージェネ事件だって全部将軍が。
Why would Yua be an operative of Shogun if she's trying to send you to the police because she believes you are the person who did the crime? But does Shogun truly exist? Are you sure he isn't just a delusion?
僕はまともだ。まともなんだ。そうでしょ。
No, you're not, but no one is. I clutched my head and shouted out to no one in particular, but what I got in reply was...
メールだよ。ボケなす。
Oh, email. Gotcha. I was like, who the fetch is that? Sarah? I sluggishly made my way over to the computer and checked my email. However, Yua. The slender was grim. Found something interesting was the subject line. It was probably just bait, and the contents of the email were meant to fetch with me. I didn't have the energy to deal with him personally right now, so I stuck to just reading the email. Needhar-kun? Have you joined the chat room at all? You haven't been on ESO either, so I have no choice but to email you. Mewtube. We've told you to watch the Vic because it's seriously fetched. I know what you're thinking. It's probably grim just fetching with me, but no, it was recorded by a NewGen perp. The nets are going absolutely insane. Hurry up and watch it before you miss the hype. Also, because it would probably get taken down. A video that had been recorded by the NewGen culprit. My fingertips on the mouse began to tremble. Couldn't take my eyes off the email. Did that mean the killer was in the video? Who was it? No, was it me? I both wanted to see and didn't want to see at the same time. This was the proof. Proof I wasn't the killer or proof I was the killer. Which one would it be? I didn't know, but it was a gamble. Is it gonna be the footage that the police had? Like, has it been leaked? Feeling my heart begin to beat faster and faster, I moved the mouse cursor and hovered over the link. But I couldn't work up the courage to click the URL.
私、あなたを助けたい。
Shut up! Don't treat me like a criminal. Don't act like you feel sorry for me. I didn't do it. You're the one on the criminal side, Yua. In an intense fit of rage, I clicked on the URL. Okay, I mean, it's definitely MewTube. It was a MewTube video. The world loading appeared on the video window.
僕じゃない僕じゃない僕じゃない僕じゃない僕じゃない僕じゃない僕じゃない僕じゃない僕じゃない僕じゃない僕じゃない僕じゃない僕じゃない僕じゃない僕じゃない僕じゃない僕じゃない。
That's a pretty good delivery. In reality, it only took about 10 seconds for the video to load, but those 10 seconds felt like an eternity to me. Eventually, it finished loading and the video started to play. It was a video of a very dark place. It's the roof of the building. The background was pitch black. Maybe it was indoors. I leaned my head in close to the monitor, trying my best to parse the information on the screen. It was dark and therefore hard to see, but there were several men and women there. They were all making a ton of noise. Maybe it was because the bitrate was too low, or maybe because the people in the video were too distraught, but I couldn't make out a single thing they were saying. Every once in a while, whenever someone screamed violently, the sound would clip horribly. After watching for a bit longer, I was able to determine that there were 5 people in the video. If you included the cameraman, it would be 6. The cameraman didn't enter the frame at all. Because of how dark it was, the faces of the 5 people were just barely visible. And as though to confirm one to another, they were caressing each other's heads, patting each other's shoulders, and hugging. I could also hear high-pitched sobbing of a girl, likely overcome with emotion. It was definitely bizarre. How did this video have any connection to NewGen? Look at the title, dude. Group dive video. Was the person filming this really the NewGen culprit? At the very least, I knew I had no memory of recording something like this. God, that's terrifying and disturbing. And then after a short while, the camera, or rather the person holding the camera, began to slowly move forward. The 5 subjects who were about 5 meters away from the cameraman gradually grew larger and larger. The picture was fairly grainy. Maybe the original image data was rendered at an extremely low bitrate in order to reduce its size. A modern video camera should have a night vision function, so I wondered why the cameraman hadn't made use of it. Could it have been an older camera? As soon as I thought that, the camera suddenly panned to the left and to the right, showing the surrounding scenery. What I had initially thought was just the pitch black darkness of the room was actually the night sky. In other words, the video had been recorded outdoors. As for the reason why there wasn't a single building or anything, it was because the video had been taken on the roof of a skyscraper. The 5 people were on the edge of the roof, all very tall building. Right behind them was a ledge, and right below that ledge was the glittering nightscape of Shibuya that could only be seen at high altitudes. Finally, I understood. I finally understood what this video was. I finally understood why it was said to have been recorded by the NewGen culprit.
集団ダイブ
And it had to be another person because there were only 5 of them. A locked room mystery in which a group of 5 men and women jumped from the roof of a Cornelius tower. The sole fact that remained unclear about NewGen was whether or not this specific incident was a murder case or a group suicide. If this video was the 5 people who jumped to their deaths, then that would mean that there had been a 6th person at the scene when the incident occurred. The 5 people shown in the video hadn't just been making noise for the sake of it. They were all slumped down on the ground, crying and shouting as they huddled together. They all refused to give up despite the fact that they were fated to die soon. One was shaking their head in denial as they cried, one was clutching their hair tightly as they fell to their knees, their shoulders heaving with each sob, one pleading with the cameraman as they sobbed, asking why they were doing this. One had already gone mad and was laughing as tears streamed down his face. It was a rabid, violent desire to stay alive, a fervent, intense plea not to die. Disconsolate indignation that screamed, "Why is this happening to us?" Insurmountable raw emotion swirled around the group. That's so messed up. Yet in a bizarre juxtaposition, the cameraman's voice was never once heard. The cameraman was eerily calm.
やめろやめろ
No matter how much I pleaded with the footage that had been taken nearly a month ago, nothing was going to change. I knew full well that it was meaningless, but I subconsciously screamed at my monitor all the same. Dude, I vibe with that. That's how I watch anything. Like I said before, one of the reasons why I thought, hey, I might actually be able to make YouTube work is because on my own, watching content, I would talk to the screen. I would talk to myself. I would speak out loud, like reading a book, listening to an audiobook, watching a video. I can't help it sometimes. I have to try really hard when I'm watching a movie I'm really into to not say anything. I usually will mutter under my breath.
こいつらみんな死にたくなんかないんだぞ
With no possible way for my words to reach them, the camera and the cameraman was holding moved even closer to the 5 people. Terrified, the 5 of them all tried to crawl away to get away from the camera. But they couldn't. Right behind them was the very edge of the helipad. There was no guardrail of any kind. The 5 of them had nowhere to go. If they moved back a little bit farther, they would fall. Refusing to heed the 5's pleas for their lives, the cameraman continued to focus solely on filming as if to agitate the 5 all the more. He had driven them completely to the edge, to the point where they took no further action at all. Then, without any sort of cue, nor any sort of signal from one another, the 5 people who had all been crying out in grief suddenly fell silent. Then they all stood up. The wind on the rooftop of the Cornelius Tower was powerful. Beckoned by the wind, the 5 of them nearly staggered. If there was even the slightest misstep, they would fall. As if in preparation for such a thing, the 5 men and women all joined hands, seemingly in resignation. They grasped each other's hands tightly.
Yose. Yamero. Hayamaru na.
Silence. It seemed to me that even the sound of the wind whipping violently through the air had stopped. All I could hear was the sound of cars driving along Shuto Expressway at the foot of the building. Even then, the cameraman did not make a single move. And then, a single person among the 5 whispered, "No."
その目誰の目?
No! That's horrifying. I froze in front of the monitor, feeling as though my heart was being strangled by an ice-cold hand. Because that was before it got picked up online. That was well before. That was back when that phrase should only have meant something to Otaku.
なんでまたその言葉なんだよ!
Wasn't this supposed to be the first NewGen case? Whose eyes are those eyes? Had been the dying message from the vampire case, and that one came forth. This didn't make any sense. Paying no mind to the screaming inside my head, the video continued to play. Hand in hand, the 5 men and women slowly stepped out into the empty air, almost as if there was a path laid out before them, and then, just like that, the 5 fell into the nightscape of the big city. I bit my lip and covered my eyes. Ugh. The group dive hadn't been a mass suicide. It, too, was a murder case. The culprit had been there when it happened. And as for who'd filmed the video, I knew who it was. Mixed in with the sound of the strong wind on the rooftop. Mixed in with the sounds of the 5 people crying out in grief. Mixed in with the blaring horns of Shoto Expressway below. Shuto. I was certain that I'd heard one particular faint sound. The laugh? It was the sound of creaking steel. Oh! The wheelchair guy. A sound that could only be heard when the cameraman was moving forward. The sound of a wheelchair.
あの時、僕の前に現れたのは、現実だったんだね。
And if it is, we're
カメラの目線が低すぎだよ。
Oh my gosh. We might be in serious danger then.
Shogun.
Oh, there we go. Chapter 4, the D-Sword. Chapter 5, Delusion. Alright. Yeah, I'm sure it exploded. I'm surprised it wasn't taken down, like, instantly. Alright. I mean, it's kind of long enough for a video. I feel a little bad because, like, I definitely rambled a lot this episode, but it's also just such a good breaking point. I think we're going to go ahead and end it here. Sorry for the loud cat that was at the beginning of the video. There's not much I can do about that, unfortunately. And then, you know, again, I went on some tirades about stuff, but I feel like it was important and it mattered. It can be frustrating, I know, from your end, so apologies for that, but it is time that I move forward, and it's okay. We've had a lot of big content come out this week, just bigger episodes and more stuff going on, so I hope you'll forgive me for that, but it means next week we'll probably give it a nice, full, long experience and just really dive into it, so thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you. Yeah, so pseudoscience aside, I do like what they're going with, and even if I don't agree with the science and interpretation that the writers use, it is being established as part of, like, the canon of understanding the story, and I can appreciate that. So don't feel like I'm going to be just super dismissive of the story from here on out. my initial dismissiveness will be from that fact of like, hey, based on what I understand, these are the problems with the logic that the writer is using here. But I'm going to suspend my disbelief in that regard and just accept that as like this fictional world's version of reality. And from that point, we can then launch into the narrative of understanding how the world works. I'm not going to be super nitpicky about it. I just simply want to express that some of the logical leaps make a lot less sense than I was experiencing in the logical leaps that were made in Steins Gate, which, again, if you haven't watched that series playthrough with me, I recommend you do, because, again, I kind of go on a little bit of rants there, too. I talked about the science that they're describing, and maybe, like, the stuff that seems in line with what we still know today and what we theorize today, but also some of the things we may have disproven or just didn't even make sense for the time that it came out. I'm going to do that. But I also can enjoy the story beyond it, so don't feel like I'm going to be using that as some kind of way to crucify the story, to make it seem like it's a terrible story. I don't think it's terrible at all. Very interesting. Very interested in seeing how this all plays out now. I wonder if, like, the Shogun guy is related to us or not. That's the thing I'm curious about, because the Shogun entity does seem like it might be a physical manifestation, like a real being. But who is it? Where did they come from? And part of me's curious if it's not Taku being a multiple personality, what if it's just a really strong delusion of his? A manifestation of, like, a delusion that's maybe been around for a while? Maybe a manifestation of the teacher that died in the bus crash that he blamed himself for. Maybe he believes it was his fault, and Shogun kind of manifested as a supreme delusion, but this delusion is taking on a life of its own, acting essentially independently of him during maybe states of vulnerability when he's asleep. Maybe that's because we've seen that it seems that he can manifest a physical, like, delusion into reality. So what if this is simply a delusional subconscious of him? So is it him? No, it's not like a multiple personality issue. But is it something manifesting from him? Possibly. I could see that being a factor. That's insane, but he is such a powerful deluder. He's so deluded and his delusions have such strength to them. It might be entirely possible that he could do that. So that's going to be my running theory for the minute. Other than that, though, I'm really excited to continue. So thank you so much. Hopefully you had a good Friday. Especially a big thank you to the patrons and members. Again, your support directly is going towards the channel specifically. There's some new stuff we're trying. I'm going to try and incorporate more and more like crafted subtitles rather than the auto-generated ones. It struggles with like the words I say, the way I say them, and also just the fact that we're mixing Japanese and English. I imagine it's just a mess. So I'm hoping to get some help from outside to try and make subtitles for the YouTube video, at least in English, more accurate, and possibly help make the subtitles more accurate for other languages too. But, that requires work, and that work requires people who aren't me, because I genuinely don't have the time for it now, especially with the full-time job. But I can find people who might be willing to make that time, and then hopefully I can compensate them. And that's kind of part of what the funds to the channel are going to go toward, is stuff like that. Trying to enhance the channel somehow has been kind of my goal for this year, is to try and find ways to improve on the model that we have established, because the model that we have right now is great. I like how it works and how like the things kind of flexibly like bend and work together. And so now I'm trying to extrapolate and kind of explore bigger horizons. But yeah, hope you enjoyed. I certainly enjoyed making this, and I appreciate your time here. Thank you so much for joining me on the channel, for being a part of this wonderful journey. I hope you continue to come back for more, and that we can enjoy more of this story and the other great stories on the channel in the coming weeks. I believe we're going to be finishing off Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky soon, which means we're going to be continuing with more narrative-based long-form games, though we're probably going to take a quick step away from the Trails series and jump into another series for a little bit and start kind of bouncing back and forth. So hope you'll find that interesting. Keep an eye out for that. But yeah, that's more to come in the future. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you so much for joining me on the channel. It's wonderful to have you here, and I'm really grateful for the time you've given me and for this series in general, and I hope you keep going back for more, because it feels like it's really getting intense now. And I've also, like, we're still so early, I can't really make any like decisions on like the characters as of yet, because we just haven't seen a whole lot of their aspects besides like these really really short encounters. So I'm really excited to just learn more about the different characters that we're meeting and see what makes them tick. See maybe why they have their D swords and what delusions they have versus the ones that we have. Because so far we have no context on the delusion side of things from their perspective, other than the fact that they have the swords, they can generate things that are errors or breakouts or whatever that is. So yeah, that'll be fun. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. Hope you have a great time today, and thanks for sticking it out. But until the next video you're watching me or happen to see me in next, I'll see you there.